I'm really excited to make this video because I feel like it touches on important topics of standing up for yourself, making boundaries, and also how to express yourself in a maybe charged or difficult situation, right? And one of the things that excites me about this video is I get to respond to a user comment that was left on the video. And I do appreciate it when people leave comments, especially ones that are like constructive and kind of like deep questions that people are asking, right? It really shows me that they're like engaging with things, and that is rewarding. So I'm gonna read the comment and also draw on some of my own past experience from a job that I had, right? And I'll start with the comment. The comment reads like this. At what point is it appropriate to say the behavior I experienced from the organization's representative is inappropriate? Pointing it out now might prevent negatively impacting the organization and its clientele in the future. So I'm going to start by kind of talking about myself, right? I, at one point, worked at the Census Bureau. And part of my job in working at the Census Bureau was to call up companies and urge them to complete their forms, right? Just upfront, like this was the task that I enjoyed the least out of any of the jobs that I've had and any of the tasks that I had to do on those jobs, right? It was because I felt like I was asking people to do something they didn't want to do. And I had to deal with people and negative attitudes in a way that normally I would not, right? Normally I could just kind of walk away and dismiss it, but like it's my job to deal with people and to encourage them to do these forms that they haven't done, that have been sent to them after we've sent them reminders, after we've, called different people, et cetera, right? So like we've already tried to get it, it hasn't happened. Now I'm trying again. And oftentimes I was met with quite a bit of negative energy coming toward me, right? Like, you person on the phone, you're just calling to waste my time. I don't want to do your shit. I don't want to have to listen to you. I don't want to have to deal with you. Go away. Or if I'm going to have to talk to you, I'm going to tell you how I really feel. I'm going to be mean about it. I don't need to be nice because not my priority, right? So I've had a bit of experience in dealing with folks who are not being complimentary or polite or cordial and having to do it again and again and again, day in, day out, because that was part of my job, right? So, first thing, in kind of looking at this comment and thinking about how to best react in this situation, right? And this video is kind of going to point out two things. Like, on one side, there is your reaction to the behavior that you felt was inappropriate. And on the other side is the person's intentions, right? Like, and so when to point out that the behavior you experienced, you felt like was inappropriate, right? The first thing I would say is point it out to the person before pointing it out to the organization, right? When I was calling people, I experienced some people who were not happy with me calling and would say, I want to talk to your manager. I want to talk to your boss. I want to talk to someone higher up the chain to talk about the conversation I had with you, right? And when they said that to me, I would tell my boss, hey, had a conversation with someone. They weren't happy with my level of service or with the way the conversation went. And so you may get a call from this person, right? Like, it wasn't just that they had to talk to the next person higher up in the chain to let the organization know about performance that they were not happy with or about a situation that they were unhappy with, right? I did that myself, and I did that proactively. One, I wanted to, give the boss heads up, like, hey, this may be coming your way. But also, it was like, this was a reflection on my work. And, like, hey, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, like, I want you to grade my work on, like, what actually happened as opposed to maybe, like, you know, things out in the ether that were not quite true to reality. So, like, if it's good, hey, I want to tell you about the good stuff. I want that to be heard and valued and appreciated and taken into consideration. If it's bad, hey, I want to tell you about the bad stuff, and I want that to be reflected and taken into consideration as well. So, one thing that I like to start with, right, when something like this happens, is like recognizing that how I interpret something may be very different than the intention that it was said with. And so, one thing that is often helpful in these situations is to ask about the person's intention, right? So, let's say you're having a poor customer service and you're saying, hey, I called, I bought this item, um, it wasn't working. And so I'm calling customer service to try and troubleshoot the issue, right? And the response you get back is, well, I'm not someone who deals with X, Y, and Z, right? So maybe you interpret that as like, hey, I'm being dismissed, my concerns are not being heard. If the organization continues like this, ignoring its customers, that's a bad thing. And so maybe it would be helpful for me to share that, right? First thing, speak to the person, right? And you can speak to how you felt and ask about their intention, right? Not assume their intention, right? Hey, why'd you just dismiss me like that, right? Maybe the person in their mind was trying to guide you in a better direction by maybe saying, well, I'm actually not the right person to deal with this, with your concern. And so there is someone else who may be better at dealing with this, right? So, like, first thing is, right, take ownership of your own reactions, like how you felt in the situation, your own emotions, and you can ask about their intention. So, hey, when you said that, I felt like I was kind of being dismissed. Was that your intention? Right? I felt this. Did you mean to elicit that feeling? Right? You're taking responsibility for how you felt, how you reacted, and you're not throwing it on the other person necessarily, but you're asking for more clarification, right? You're asking what their intention was, right? And if their intention really was to hurt you, then, like, okay, that's more serious. But what is oftentimes the case is that their intention was more benign than that, right? That it wasn't meant to be hurtful, wasn't meant to be mean, wasn't meant to be rude, right? Going back to my example before with my situation, when I was calling people, the feeling that I got a lot of times was like, these people are trying to defend the companies that they work for, right? And they may be trying to save the company from filling out paperwork that they do not feel is value added to the company, right? And so their response of getting an attitude with me on the phone, right, is like them doing something that they felt was justified, right? Them kind of standing up for their company's time or even for their own time, right? Like them making a boundary, and a boundary that they felt like would be appropriate, helpful, productive, right? And so, like, understanding where that other person is coming from then, like, changes it, right? Okay, when I know that, like, they're trying to do the right thing or something that they believe is right for a good reason, my reaction to that is much more kind and forgiving and understanding, right? And in talking with the person directly, right? Like, as opposed to just going to the organization first, you give the person a chance to think about their behavior, to think about how they presented themselves, right? Another thing that's helpful is to say, hey, when you said this, I felt dismissed. I feel like if you had instead said it in this other way, I would have received it a little bit better, right? Like, again, taking ownership of your reaction and offering something that you feel like is positive and helpful and would be beneficial going forward, right? Like, you are coming from that positive place. You are sharing something that you think is helpful. You are sharing something that you think would lead to better interactions in the future. And so it's showing this other person that, like, your intention is well meaning, right? And in the other video that kind of the person left a comment on, I wanted to just go back to that briefly because um, one of the main points in that video is like, I feel like there were 2 points that stick out in my mind, right? One was um, when things affect you and sit with you, right? Like when you are upset about how someone else acted, right? Like, you should take responsibility in thinking about how to be less affected by the actions of others, right? Like, and in watching the channel, I'm sure people will see and have seen that, like, I very much believe and have found that, like, going out, being more social, starting more conversations with people, interacting with them more and more and more helps and has helped me to be less reactive to the negative things or things that I perceive to be negative that come from others, right? Like, still happens, still happens, right? And will still happen in the future, right? It's not just like anything anyone says will, like, I'll never think about again, like, won't sink in, like, but it's more of like, I'm much better at not letting it sink in, at moving on more quickly, at not letting it get to me, right? And so I think that, like, that is a skill that can be developed and improved over time, right? The skill to not let others' negativity bring you down, right? So the other kind of point in that video was also recognizing that, like, in that video, I brought up a story about a gentleman who said, had a poor customer service experience, and kind of said, I'm not someone who ever does that, right? Like, and that in doing that, it was kind of like, I am better than that. I would never do a thing like that. Um, I'm not the type of person that acts in that way, as opposed to a viewpoint which I feel like is a more productive one, which is, in what situations have I acted like that, or would I act like that, right? The first is like a better than, lesser than, which gets into kind of an ego centered view, right? The second is a more empathetic view, right? And not saying that you are, acting wild and crazy and mean like the other person, right? Like, but like, it's recognizing that, like, you're human, they're human. If their behavior is human behavior, your behavior is human behavior. There may be some situations where you have or could or would act in the same way, right? And so it's like, again, trying to generate a bit of empathy as you're thinking about the interaction, as you're thinking about your experience, and as you're thinking about yourself and how to improve in your own relationships, right? with those two things in mind, right? Like, hey, empathetic view. Maybe if I'd had something going on in my personal life, I would have reacted in a way that was not bringing forth my very best self, right? And so that like recognition that like, hey, sometimes my mood is up here, sometimes it's not quite up there. And when it's not quite up there, I may react or carry myself in a little bit different way. And others may notice that in some way, shape, or form, right? Like coming from that perspective, I feel like also kind of lessens the intensity of my reactions when it happens to me, right? Coming from a perspective of like, what if this person just had a bad day? What if their mom just died? What if they just lost someone close to them in their life, right? Like, um, if that were something that happened to me, I would be affected, and maybe maybe I would act out in the same way this person acted out. Maybe I wouldn't, but like it would certainly be something that affected me. And at the very least, people who are very close to me would be able to tell that like I have been affected, right? And probably even others, like, depending on the situation, maybe I would show up very, very differently. And so, kind of to, that's kind of like bringing back up that empathy point of view, and that extra empathy, right? Like helps to calm you down, right? It helps to like provide a more understanding viewpoint between you and the other person, even without that other person having to change anything, right? And so like that is like the kind of personal side of it, of like things that you can do to change your reaction, right? Because like at the end of the day, there's some things you can control, some things you cannot control, right? You cannot control the actions of others, but you do have more control over your reactions, right? And specifically when you think of it as, I'm reacting a certain way right now. If the same thing were to happen tomorrow, I'm going to react the same way tomorrow, right? Like, but if I were to take time, practice, meditate, have more experiences in certain conversations, then maybe the way I react in the future wouldn't be the way I'm reacting right now, right? Like more agency and control over yourself, your emotions, your reactions, what things affect you, how you view certain situations, even if kind of gaining or developing that control takes time and effort, right? It's like the real growth mindset, right? It's not just X happens to me, I'm going to react in this way, but this happens to me, and maybe over time I can change how I react for a better outcome, right? Even if the better outcome is just like, I'm still going to be upset because it still felt the service was bad, but it's not going to affect me. And I'm not going to think about it as much, and I'm going to free up my mental energy, focus, etc., for other things, so that I can be a better person, so that I can show up in my relationships in a better way, so that I'm not like looping on something negative and that's bringing more negativity into my life than I would like. In terms of organization as well, what I would also say is like, well, first, I'm going to say, I'm going to recommend like a resource that I found helpful. It's a book called The Next Conversation by Jefferson Fisher, right? He was an attorney. I think maybe even still is an attorney, but kind of as an attorney has had to deal with kind of coaching people and how to present themselves in court, and deal with other lawyers who are maybe trying to represent his own clients in a different way and in a negative light, or get people riled up to show their bad side so that it influences the outcome of a case. But he is someone who has kind of studied communication, had experience with it at a very high level. I found his book helpful, and that is one that I would present as a possible, additional reading or additional exploration opportunity, right? The other thing is like with the organization, right? So let's say you reach out to the person, you tell them, hey, this is how I felt in this situation. Was that your intention? Maybe you don't like where that goes. Maybe you say, hey, this is how I felt in this situation. I think I really would have found this response to leave me in a much better place. The person, ignores it. It's still mean, maybe even more mean, like whatever, right? Like, first thing, you give the person a chance and an opportunity to understand where you're coming from and clarify their intentions and address the behavior with you in the moment, right? Like, give the other person a chance to understand you, give the other person a chance to clarify, and give the other person a chance to address the behavior if they felt like the behavior was not aligned with their intentions or had an effect that they did not realize or anticipate it would have. I would also say, like, if you do this, right, have the interaction with the person and you're still feeling like unsatisfactory about it, like, I don't think it is a bad thing to go to the organization and say, hey, I had this experience. I was not satisfied with it because this and this and this, right? I think the organization hears it much better and it sticks, right? It's much more actionable when you also say, when you can also point to, I asked the person to clarify their intentions. I shared I shared my own uh, feelings, right, to give the other person a chance to understand me a little bit better. And I shared a possible better alternative and feel like those things didn't help, right? It's one thing to just say I had a bad experience, but a different thing to say I had a bad experience, tried to share how that experience affected me, how it could be improved in the future, and tried to give the person an opportunity in the moment to adjust how they were acting toward me, right? It comes off as a much stronger, much more well thought out, much more well intentioned thing than just I had a bad experience, right? And like, I feel like it's a much more teachable moment from the organization's perspective, right? It gives them more context, gives them more insight. Because, like I said, when I was doing the calls, you know, asking people to do the surveys, like the response I often got was like, okay, Jamal, hey, we sent you to training. We see you day in and day out. We know the type of person that you are. If someone had a bad experience with you, our assumption is that it's not your fault, right? Like you were trying to do the right thing. You were trying to do what we'd asked you to do. You were bringing a positive, polite, well-meaning um, personality to the conversation. And so if the person had a bad experience, right, we'll listen and, I'll talk to them. But um, in terms of like, do this different next time, that was certainly not the first response, right? Like the first response was, we're going to trust that you did the right thing and go from there. Maybe if it keeps happening again and again and again and again with you, then like maybe it'll be something that we have to look into more. But also, like I said, what helps more is to provide that additional context and share that you for the person to understand you, to clarify their intentions, and to possibly do something different in that moment. Right. So that doesn't mean like you don't share it with the organization, you can't share it with the organization. And the only thing I would then point out is like that the organization changes. Right. And like, in this conversation, we've been talking about organizations, but I feel like what this is really touching on is interactions with people, right? And that is much broader, right? It can be, with friends in a romantic relationship with a partner. It can be at work with your boss. It can be dealing with another company. It can be, um, you know, out of the gym dealing with the clerk or something like that, right? There's so many situations where you're going to be dealing with someone else and their view on what is right may not align with your view. And even if you present, hey, I felt like what you did was wrong, they may not change, they may not listen to you, they may not give you the time of day. And so, like, when you present this to the person or to the organization, recognize that from the start, right? Like, you have the good intentions, you're trying to show the empathy, you're trying to let them understand you in a more clear way, you're trying to understand them in a more clear way, but like all that may not lead to positive change, right? And so, like, at the end of the day, their behavior is on them. Your behavior, your reactions is on you. So, like, understand what you can control and understand that the things that you cannot control, you may have to let go of, right? Again, I don't think it's bad to reach out to the company to give the person an opportunity to change, right? I think those are positive things, right? Especially when coming from a place of good intentions. But I would say, like, don't go on a crusade trying to change the other organization or change the other person because they may never change, right? Like, if you give them opportunity, you tell them the feedback, you share the contact, you share the feedback, you give them the additional context. They don't hear it, they don't listen, they don't want to listen. Like, the next thing is like, okay, well, how am I going to respond differently in the future, right? Maybe it is okay, don't want to work with this person again, or would like to work with someone else, or would like to work with a different organization, or something like that, right? But in those situations, it's, I am going to do this, I am going to change this, right? Like, I am going to act differently in the future, because at the end of the day, that's what you have control over: yourself, your actions, your reactions. So try and reach out. Like, don't think it's a bad thing to share feedback, even when that feedback is, let's just call it negative feedback, or feedback about a negative situation, right? Like, feedback about a negative situation can still be presented in a nice, constructive way, right? Like, what I don't think is appropriate is to, like, you're operating up here, the person goes low, says something mean, disrespectful, you don't like it, like, well, I'm gonna get disrespectful right back with you. Like, and like, I've done it, right? Like, I've done it. So, like, again, I ain't above that. I have not been above that, but also, like, in thinking about how I show up in different situations, that is something that I would like to do differently in the future. And then I feel like I am doing a better job of doing differently now and into the future. So try, do what you can, right? View yourself. Don't let it sink in and affect you too much. Try and share the feedback because you want to be helpful, right? Um, but also recognize, like, hey, maybe there's some situations where I act like that or would act like that. And so I'm going to approach the situation with extra empathy, right? I'm going to try and be understanding. I'm going to try and share my experiences, how I felt, how I interpreted things, so that the other person can understand me better. If all those things don't work out, you want to take it to the organization, escalate it to another level, cool. Also recognize that that may not make a positive change, right? Okay, understand it may not make a positive change. I'm still going to do it because I still feel like it's the right thing to do. Cool. That's positive, right? Like, it's not bad to think is bad, right? It's bad to take your emotions, right? Say, I think it was bad, and then point the finger at the other person, right? Like, if you thought it was bad, that's on you, right? You're still sharing with the other person, still getting the opportunity, right? Like, but like, your reactions, your responsibility. The organization, and like your actions in terms of talking with the person, trying to address them, talking with the organization, trying to share insight that would help the organization, right? Like, those are good actions, right? Like those are well intentioned, those are meant to help, those are meant to smooth the waters, right? So, like, don't feel bad about those things, right? Like, again, the other video pointed out the guy like talking bad about this person I've never met, never interacted with to me. like, like, at that point, you're just talking shit. Like, you're just gossiping, talking shit about someone, and like maybe you feel like you had a good reason to talk about them, but like um, you don't have to let it affect you in that way, right? Like, so I hope this is helpful. I hope that you can like feel that I was trying to come to it from a like place of empathy, place of understanding, right? Share my own experiences, share resources that I have found helpful, and at the end of the day, like validate your feelings as well, right? Like it is not nice to be badly. You do not have to accept bad treatment, right? Like that's not what I'm saying. But at the end of the day, like also understand that when you are seeking to be treated better from someone, you may not get what you would like. And so you'll have to adjust your actions and reactions accordingly, move forward in the best way that you can, because at the end of the day, you're in control of yourself. You want the best for yourself, and you got to look out for yourself. So I hope this video finds you well. I hope it's been helpful. Thank you for sharing the comment. I love you.